Welcome into Inside College Basketball Now. We are now pleased to be joined by the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes. He is Jake Diebler. And Jake, welcome. What is the summer vacation spot for the Dieblers in 2025?
We went down to Naples for 2 nights. It was a very short trip, John, but we had a good time. Kids had a great time. We were able to hit the pool and the beach all at once, so it was fun.
Well, I'm happy that you guys got some time away. I'm curious, since you transitioned from being an assistant coach to a head coach, how have things changed from a time constraint perspective?
I felt like I worked really, really hard as an assistant coach, but there's always something different to do as a head coach. And one thing I think, when you become a head coach, and I went to different events and things to try and prepare, and I've worked for some great people that helped me prepare, but nothing prepares for you for the mental conditioning required of being a head coach. There's no way to really prep for it because you have to experience it. And that's been the biggest thing. The time, but it's mind constantly thinking, what's next? How do I help these people? How do I help our pro? Just constantly thinking about those things. When maybe you're an assistant coach, you get to be a little more specific. But that's been the biggest difference for me.
What was it like for you going from being the interim head coach, obviously you took over late in the season, to being the permanent head coach at Ohio State?
Well, first, it was a dream come true. And, when I was serving as interim head coach, the plan wasn't, hey, let's do what we can to become, the head coach here. The plan really was, God has us in this moment, and we need to serve him and the guys on that team and the guys within our program as well as we possibly could. That's what my wife and I kept talking about over and over and over again during that process. And then, all of a sudden it became real, had an interview, and then got the job. And it was a pretty special moment for us.
Now, you're drinking from a fire hose as soon as you become a head coach, but there is no substitute in life in any vocation for experience. What's the biggest thing that Jake Diebler knows right now about being the head coach at Ohio State that he didn't maybe know a year ago?
Well, I think the experience of roster management going through that last spring to this spring was important because, we were able to adjust and I think make some different decisions. So that's part of it. The in-game experience that we got this year was huge. For the first time in Ohio State basketball history, which is 126 years, we had 5 straight games decided by one possession.
Wow.
And, there's no, right. That's like going to getting your master's degree and end of game management all on the fly and doing it in 5 straight games. So there were things like that I think helped prepare me for this upcoming season. Certainly experience is really valuable, but I felt like I hired really well, John, to be honest with you. Yeah. So that made up for, my lack of experience in some areas, but that everything we went through, the adversity we faced last year, which it was a lot, was very helpful in helping me personally grow, but also help our program grow.
Now, Jake, your team finished 17-15 last year, but your team still won at Purdue and beat Kentucky by 20 at Madison Square Garden. Both those teams were in the Sweet 16. As you reflected, why do you think your team wasn't consistent enough to be in the NCAA tournament?
I think as the season went on, we ran out of gas, and we had ourselves in position, to take that step and get into the NCAA tournament. There's no nights off in the Big Ten, so you don't get a chance to catch your breath, or you don't get a chance to, get healthy. And I think for us, the choppiness of our roster and who we had available, how we got to practice, all that caught up to us the last, month of the season. So, but, we played also the toughest schedule Ohio State basketball's played in a long, long time. And I like that. I want us to schedule aggressively and play a tough schedule. I think that schedule certainly helped position us. The reality is we were probably a game short. And, I think we positioned ourselves to make it. We just didn't quite have enough there down the stretch with some of our roster attrition that we faced during the year. And there were some things to be learned in that as well, John.
So you go through all of that emotionally, and then you have to sit back and watch March Madness. For Jake Diebler, what was it like now as the head coach of Ohio State to watch March Madness and not be a part of it?
Yeah, it was really painful. And to be honest with you, I didn't watch very much. I went back and watched after the tournament, but at that time, my focus was strictly on retention first,
Mm-hmm.
and then recruiting and roster management. Like that was the focus for me. So I watched a little bit here or there. Certainly followed some of our Big Ten teams, but spent a lot of my time, getting ready to put a roster together for this season that I'm really excited about. But it started with retention for us, and I think that pain and the disgust, the anger, like everything, that came with not being in the tournament this year, this past year was great motivation, and still is, to be honest with you. Like I still feel that. And I think did a lot of good things in our first year of the program. We had a ways to go. We took some steps forward. It just wasn't quite enough. We own that. Now we got to take it up, to that next level. And I feel like we positioned ourselves to do that.
Well, you retained a number of players who could be all Big Ten caliber performers this year. Bruce Thornton, John Mobley, Devin Royal. We'll get to them all in a second. But I'm curious, what were the biggest things that you wanted to add to your roster once you retained the pieces that you discussed?
We felt like we needed to raise just our collective basketball IQ, just kind of roster wide. Last year we were really young. I think there's a reality to that. And we wanted to get older. Retention helps with that, certainly. But we also felt if we could raise our collective IQ, it would allow us to do a couple things that were important to me. One is play faster. We played with some pace last year. I want to play with more pace. Mm-hmm. I think the smarter you are as a team, the faster you can play, because you can process things quickly. You can take advantage of that first defensive mistake. So that was a big thing for us. And specifically, we wanted to add some perimeter skill in the front court, guys who could shoot it with some consistency and play make, certainly for themselves and for others. And then, we needed to do a better job scoring the ball inside. And I felt like we addressed all of those things. Ultimately time will tell, but I feel just so far this summer, those dividends are paying off, and we're seeing some results of that. And that was a big focus for us. Increased collective basketball IQ.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing, obviously, how that comes out in the wash in November and December. You're going to play another arduous non-conference slate, but you have really hit on the retention piece so far in this chat, and you're going to retain, obviously, a number of talented perimeter players. Bruce Thornton is the constant piece for this program. He's the consistent piece at the most important position on the floor. But John Mobley's somebody who came into college basketball last year and produced for a freshman at a very high level. What type of a jump do you think he now could make as a sophomore?
Well, if he finishes the summer off like he started and carries that into the preseason in the fall, he's going to make a real jump. I've been really impressed with how he's just handled himself, his maturity, his approach, his work ethic. He's got a different intensity to him right now, freshman to sophomore year. And he's certainly gifted when it comes to putting the ball in the basket, and we'll lean on that. But I also think he developed as a playmaker last year, which is going to be important for us, John. His ability to create for others because of the attention that he draws when he's out there is going to be big for us. So I'm excited. I'm expecting really big things from him, and he's got a great deal of responsibility that comes with that, but he's built for it. That's the thing that I've been really impressed with. His mentality and approach would reflect that.
Devin Royal, somebody who's produced for a number of seasons in college basketball. You've clearly stated already that you want to transition him to more of a wing type role. What do you see in that type of adjustment for him?
I think it's experience. There needs to be a comfortability that develops over time, and we've been pushing that. We were training for that really back in the spring, and throughout this summer, he's been playing, at that wing forward spot. But I felt like him being exclusively inside last year it hurt us. Our size hurt us on the glass. We did some really good things defensively. We couldn't finish possessions enough on the board. So we needed to get bigger. Now you slide him to that, small forward position. Well, now we're bigger. Now we're more physical. Now we can rebound better. And Devin's got a high basketball IQ. That's why I feel so confident in him making the transition quickly. And you also saw a trend in an uptick in his 3-point shooting the second half of the season. And he's done nothing but carry that over into this offseason. Been really impressed with how he's shooting the ball. So getting him in more of a playmaking space, for others, he could certainly do it for himself. We're not going to go away from some of his strengths either. Like, we'll take advantage of his ability to score at different levels. But he's got a high basketball IQ. He's tough. And I think those are the reasons why I'm so confident he's going to be able to make that transition well, because we need him to do it well.
Jake, which newcomers do you think will have the biggest impact for Ohio State this season?
Well, I think it starts with Christoph Tilley, and been so impressed, John, with his ability to dribble, pass, and shoot. We want him to increase his three-point volume, and he's done that with a lot of efficiency in the short time we've been playing this summer. I think Brandon Knoll, who's got a ton of college experience, is older, versatile. He's a career 36, 37% three-point shooter. He's going to be really important. Gabe Cupps has brought an energy and a toughness into our program, which I think the more you can have of that, the better. And we got some other guys too. I think two of our young guys, Amari Bynum and Matthew Grujicic, are two guys who are going to get better as the year goes on and have a lot of potential to be impactful this season. And both have great positional size. And Matthew's experience of playing internationally, Amari's physical tools, we're expecting, good things from both those guys. And then I think we're, Josh or John want us really progressing well. There's no timetable on that yet to give anything like firm information, but I've been impressed with his just effort and kind of discipline to rehab. So I love the pieces that we've brought in. I'm really excited about how they've meshed well with the guys we retained, and it's been good so far this summer.
And Josh O'John was a player who obviously was a rotational piece on a Baylor team that was a very high seed in the NCAA tournament a couple of years ago. When you and your staff obviously start thinking about the start of the season, do you move forward with the premise that you think he's going to be available in early November?
Yeah, until we're given information that he won't be, we'll keep moving forward to that. He's watching everything from the side right now, learning our terminology. We're doing some different things offensively, so everybody's got to be paying close attention. And he's been great. But I think only time will tell. And it's a situation. He's got a bright basketball future, so we can't rush him. We got to make sure that he's ready before he steps out on the court, and we'll continue to evaluate. And we won't have more information on that till well into fall camp.
All right. Well, we're transitioning, it feels like, not just in terms of Ohio State's bigs, but also the way teams schedule. Ohio State's going to play Notre Dame at home. You're also going to play at Pittsburgh in the return of a home-and-home series. You're also going to play a game against North Carolina and West Virginia on neutral courts. And then you're going to play Virginia in February. From a head coaching perspective, what is it like playing a handful of power conference opponents versus playing in an early season tournament?
Well, I think it's great. And for us, we're going to play 20 really good games in Big Ten play. You got to play good games to get ready for those 20. And so we felt like, making sure that we schedule at least 5 high major opponents was important. And I love what we're doing, with Virginia and playing them in February. I think getting a kind of a mental break as well from just the grind of Big Ten season and going and playing someone who I think is going to be really good, going to play another quality opponent in a different, a big arena and things is great. And I talked to John Shire, talked to Brad Underwood about their experience last year, and just felt really good about doing it after those conversations. So excited for that game too. And, we want to bring in a high major game into our arena for our fans every year. Mm-hmm. So Notre Dame, Ohio State, certainly regionally makes a ton of sense. I think they're going to be a real problem in the ACC this year. So excited, for the quality of game that's going to be. And those two brands in the Midwest make a lot of sense being together too. So that's going to be a high level game. We obviously got to go to Pitt, return from this season. And that was a high level game this past year. So looking forward to that. I think our schedule came together nicely, and really excited about the way we're going to be challenged leading into Big Ten play.
Jake, you look at more and more schools playing these bigger games in February. I know you have to go through the guts of a season and see how your team responds, but is this something you think you're going to want to do moving forward in seasons to come, just to give your team a break from the winter in the Big Ten?
I think, yes, we'll have this conversation again, you and I, after we experience that game in February against Virginia. But when I played and when I was coaching early on in my career, you had the bracket buster games.
Right.
I don't know if you remember those, where
Yeah.
mid-majors from different conferences would play each other. You'd be on TV, and it was a big deal. So it almost feels a little bit like that, where you're taking the ACC, the Big Ten, playing a game against what I think are going to be two really good teams, and doing it in February, which gives the fans something different. It's something different for the players, but I think it's going to be a good thing. And moving forward, I would be, as long as everything goes well this year, I'd be all for, making that a trend, certainly.
Well, Jake, we're going to ask you to put your analyst hat on here for a second. There's 18 teams now in the Big Ten. Obviously, Purdue returns, I believe, 86% of its scoring from last year's Sweet 16 team, which is a ridiculous number. Michigan is projected to be one of the better teams in the country. Aside from Purdue and Michigan, give me a team that Jake Diebler's looking at, not named Ohio State, that he thinks can be at the top of the Big Ten next season.
I think UCLA had a really good spring. They're a team. I'm really interested to see how things come together for Illinois. Obviously, Brad Underwood is a proven, great coach, and they've gone a different approach with roster management this year. So I'm excited to see how that works. I think top to bottom, when you look at our league, there is no bottom.
Sure.
Teams like, Washington, and, I think going into year 2, Danny Sprinkle is going to do a great job. So the one thing I love about this league is if you don't bring it, and we found this out once or twice last year, if you don't bring your best, you are going to feel it.
Yeah.
You have to bring your best every night. You got to prepare to be your best every time you step on the court. And, that's going to be the case, probably even more so this year when you look at what teams have done in the spring. But, I think we've made significant strides too in our roster. And, I think I'm expecting big things for us as well.
Well, let's wrap on this. How does Ohio State perform like one of the best teams in the Big Ten this season and then put itself in position to be an NCAA tournament team with a quality seed?
Well, we want to be the toughest team on the court when we're out there. I think that's going to be the most important thing. And then, that will translate into rebounding the ball better. But I think as our pace continues to improve, and hopefully that helps display our collective basketball IQ, I think it's going to be a fun brand of basketball to watch, but most importantly, I think it's going to help us be efficient. We have some real firepower offensively, John. And, I think we got to find ways to spread that love around. And it's been really good so far. We've played more 5-on-5 in 4 weeks of summer than we did last year, all the way up until probably the second week of September because of injuries and things. So I feel really good about where we're at this summer, but we got to continue to just make sure we build our foundation on toughness and just utilizing that high basketball IQ that we brought in.
Well, Jake, it's going to be a lot of fun to cover. Appreciate a couple of minutes. Know how busy you are, and as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
You got it. That's Ohio State head coach Jake Diebler. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.